Hello, everyone. An absolute warm welcome to Me Vision Academy. Myself is Adrian Groenewald and Louis Groenewald, the old man. With me, we've been on a journey together, finding successful and exceptional leaders for many decades now, and it's wonderful to be with you. Today, we have a very special, the Me Vision Academy has a very special award called the Exceptional Leadership Award for Professor Thuli Madonsela. We usually give away successful leadership awards, which are very exclusive, but the Exceptional Leadership Award is slightly different. That is for a leader who has affected the entire country and not necessarily just their organization or their industry, but really impacted the entire country during the course of their leadership career. But before I introduce the Prof very specifically, just a quick note, our passion is honestly to track, recognize, and celebrate, also learn from successful leaders and exceptional leaders. And we hope we can inspire others to become successful and exceptional. We think the world needs this desperately. And what we do now more and more is we actually seek for the less visible or the more inconspicuous leaders out there. So we do find the leaders that are easier to track, your more prominent leaders, but we believe organizations are full of successful leaders on various levels. And we're going on a journey, we'll tell you more, of finding and recognizing 30,000, excuse me, successful leaders by 2030. So it's going to be quite a journey, and we'll need all of your help. We want to find those successful leaders on all levels, not just at the very top of organizations. We've been tracking Professor Madonsela for a long time, and we welcome all her colleagues that she's invited. They're joining as we speak as well. Thank you so much for joining us today on this special occasion. I'm going to pin the Prof and ourselves as we get involved, so it's to make her bigger, and then also the old man and myself, and then we will be involved in the conversation for the next little while. But all of the guests, you're all welcome, and please mute yourself as you come in. We'd really appreciate that. As I say, we've been tracking the Prof. Just please mute. What do we have here? Let's see if we can mute. Let's all make sure we mute ourselves. I'll try to find those who are not muted. Prof, I mean, over the years, we've been on Cliff Central and other places. We've met you and interviewed you, wrote a lot about you, actually, to be honest, myself and the former Business Report editor. You were at my book launch. What a great honor years ago. So over the years, we've tracked you from a distance, but we've had some associations in and out, and it's been such a privilege to follow you. For those who don't really know, I mean, obviously everyone knows Professor Madonsela. She's a former public protector, where she had played a big role in our country, founder of Tuma Foundation. And what I like about the foundation, it says one of its aims is to develop leadership for democracy, development, and peace, focusing on a leadership approach that is ethical, purposeful, impactful, and committed to service. So that's fantastic part of the Tuma Foundation. And then there's also, she's the social justice chair and many other things involved at Stellenbosch University. Prof, welcome and absolutely congratulations on this exclusive award.
Well, greetings, Adrian. I am extremely honored and consider it to be an immense privilege to be on this show and to receive this award, particularly being given by somebody like yourself who has studied and written on leadership and understands the subject and understands its value to a functional organization, a functional country, and a peaceful world.
Thank you, Prof. It's a great honor. It's an honor for us that you accept it. And what I'm going to do in a moment, because this is electronic, I'm going to share screen and then quickly do the handover of this special award. It's an exclusive recognition of exceptional leadership, as I said. Very few will receive this one in particular. And it's awarded to Prof Thuli Madonsela for what? We can put a lot of things on here, but this is specifically that we've noted, consistently leading self and people successfully. Successfully leading as public protector of South Africa, positively transforming the future of South Africa. I could add there by being very brave and also showing how exceptional leadership can ignite hope for a brighter future. Another reason is continuing your journey of building a better and happier society, amongst other things through your foundation. But one that's also very close to our heart, and it lies right next to our vision of 30,000 successful leaders by 2030, is your exceptional influence on the mentoring and inspiring of future successful leaders. And we're going to unpack this just a little bit. I'm one of the co-founders of Me Vision Academy, and that's our slogan, a journey to best self. And we've added the word confidence. We believe when people are on their journey to their best self, they actually ignite an authentic confidence in themselves, not this arrogant confidence. So, Prof, that's the award. That's why we're doing it. I'd like us to start off by just asking you about leading self. We really believe great leaders lead themselves effectively. They lead others effectively. They lead their organization that they're part of or their vision they lead successfully. And very often they lead successfully outside of their so-called working environment. Now, we certainly want to talk to you about the broader leadership issues, and your foundation. For sure. But just for a moment, let's go personal. Let's get personal and ask you about leading self. What have you learned about that important building block?
The greatest lesson I have learned about leading self or leading myself is that the foundation of all leadership is leading yourself. Secondly, that leading yourself is one of the most difficult levels of leadership. When we talk about leadership at Stellenbosch University in the Tuma, we talk about 3 levels of leadership: leading yourself, leading others, and then leading with others. And leading yourself is very difficult because you know right and wrong, but often reconciling what you do with what you know is difficult. So what I learned personally was that I needed to cultivate emotional intelligence, social intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and intellectual intelligence so as to anchor myself to consistently do what I believe is right. And when I was rising up in positional leadership spaces, there were times when I let myself down when it came to leading myself. For example, I often talk about a meeting with Dalai Lama, one of the most amazing human beings on earth, where on being unable to lead him to side with me when I had a dispute with 2 professors that I was managing, I got so angry and banged the door and left. And so for me, that's one of the moments where leading myself was a problem. And later I discovered that really the issue was about modulating your emotions. And now when we teach young leaders, we include the neuroscience of why sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot, so to speak.
Yeah, Prof, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because isn't there a dilemma in our world that a lot of people can rise to prominence and very senior and influential positions without visibly leading themselves effectively? I mean, the world provides for that. The world allows for that, doesn't it? And isn't that a big problem that we have a lot of that going on? So my public image is successful and I'm wealthy and I've built a big business or I'm a politician. But back at the ranch, in my family, in my work environment, I'm not at all doing what I say. Is there too much of that, do you think? It's a problem, isn't it?
Well, yes. We all supposed to be impeccable with our word as leaders. But one thing I know, and it appears in a book I wrote in 2002 on gender management and leadership, is that if you can't lead yourself, your leadership will not be sustainable. It will also not be impactful in the direction that you want. If we agree that leadership is the art of influencing and inspiring yourself and others to think in a particular way and act in ways that achieve desired outcomes. So if I don't do what I say must be done, we know from leadership data and writings that people do what you do, not what you say. So if I'm corrupt, for example, and I ask people to do corrupt things in my organization, in my presence, they will do what I say must be done. But in my absence, they will do what they've seen me do. If I lie in tight spaces, if I ask them to do corrupt things for me, they will do corrupt things for themselves and for others. So it's not really sustainable. People like Hitler found out the hard way that acting improperly and being unable to restrain yourself has consequences. They might not be soon, but they eventually get to you. Stalin is one example. So people will follow you, and not because you are influencing them, because they're afraid of you. But the moment they have an opportunity to unfollow you, trust me, they'll unfollow you.
Yeah, and I have seen that where someone is super successful, but because of that leading self component that's missing, as soon as that leader is released or no longer leads with positional power, then all sorts of spiders come out the cupboards and all sorts of things suddenly emerge. So very, very important for your legacy as well, I guess, is that you're congruent in leading yourself and what you expect of others. Thank you for that, Prof. Before we go on to leading others, I want to ask you about our slogan, Journey to Best Self, and then the word confidence. How has your journey been? And just any thought on that specific principle of journey to best self-confidence. Old man, you want to say anything? Any observations or questions for the Prof?
Prof, you're on a unique position. All these years we've known you, and many other people have known you. You kind of stand out as that kind of person who's true to themselves, and yet they're able to mix in a pretty brutal world and maintain those standards. So, as an old man involved for many years with other people and trying to mentor other people, Prof, I just thank you for that. It's a beautiful example. It's a heavy load to carry. That's why Arden emphasizes managing yourself. It's always a prime duty, and we appreciate hearing from you about that vital foundational principle. Thanks, Arden.
Thanks, old man. Prof, journey to best self. Aren't we all on that journey? Surely everyone is on that journey, their own little journey of best self.
Absolutely. Firstly, just to express my gratitude for those kind words, Mr. Groenewald. Again, when such kind words come from elders who have seen it all, you take it very seriously, and I'm super humbled by your kind remarks. And back to this issue of the journey into ourselves and our best selves, it really is a challenge of being human, both from a point of view of leadership and just from the point of view of being the best human you can be. From Ubuntu. In Ubuntu, when they say you are Ubuntu, that means you've really gone through that journey of being your best self and have become your best self. So people like Mandela, when you say this person is Ubuntu, you don't mean that they are a two-legged animal. You mean that they have the process of humanification, for lack of a better word, has been a successful process. And in my own life, it's been ups and downs, like most people. I think in my journey of moving inwards, as opposed to outwards. When I was young, the first thing I noticed about life was what's wrong with the way I am treated. I call that my stage of justice for me. The second stage was what's wrong with the way the world treats people like me, and that was justice for us. And then my third stage was what's wrong with the way the world treats people. But it was to the fourth stage where I realized that actually everything we do is about justice, and ultimately we all have some responsibility to make this world the best place the best place it can be. But it starts in small spaces. And even as leaders, as we demand to be respected, in Zulu we say, or in most Ubuntu languages we say, respect is a two-way process. So when I was young, I think I was more feisty in demanding my own rights and being very helpful. But in terms of how I led, it was more about almost commanding people to do things in a particular way. And I learned in the process that, well, firstly, if you lead by example, there's a lot more you get from people. But secondly, before you demand a lot from people, help them to discover themselves too. Hence, over time, we developed this leadership model that is called epic leadership, ethical, purpose-driven, impact-conscious, and committed to serve. Incidentally, just a last word on that. We stumbled on that model initially from my public protector days, where the starting point was I grew up being the kind of person who's praised for knowing everything, because I had a lot of solitude and therefore a lot of reading, and I was told I was smart, and that can be an impediment, a social impediment, when people tell you you know and you're smart, and therefore you tend to tell people rather than to help people to discover the truth with you and rise to the occasion with you. My early days as a pub protector, I asked people to change the system, to make sure that we don't focus on who does a lot of investigations, because people can do a shoddy job and accomplish more investigations than somebody who accomplishes only 3 investigations in 1 year, or even 1. Because it's a complex investigation and they've done hard work. So I was right in questioning the methodology, but how did I question it? After they were not able to come up with a better system, I leveraged my hard power to say, you're not going to get your bonuses. It was this time of the year. And who does that? And of course, beginning of the year, 2012, people showed me how to live together, and it was quite interesting. I talk about having been unfollowed, not on Twitter, in real life, and it's not people defying you, but it's body language that tells you people are doing just enough not to be fired, and this is how then we ended up with the epic leadership model, by stumbling into another leader from corporate South Africa who said to me, you write about what you want, but you're wrong about the process. If you want to go fast, go alone. So says ancient Africans. If you want to go far, go together. And so, but going together requires you to be strong in leading yourself, because you've got to be conscious of everything you say or do not say and how it impacts on the team. It requires people to have a very strong sense of responsibility and a very strong ethical foundation. But it also requires you as a positional leader to let go of some of your powers so that you can lead together. We require. So why do people fail? It's when we haven't done enough of the internal journey and when we haven't acquired the intelligences to anchor our thinking and our consistent actions.
Yeah, Prof, you've given us so much meat there. I have a bad habit of not making notes when I interview, and it's also a good thing because I'm really engaged, but then I forget sometimes what I want to re-engage you about. This principle of going inward, it's interesting. The more you authentically go inward, the more you're able to focus outward. It matters less and less about you, the more you go inward and discover yourself, and more about others. So it's an inward-outward journey. But this unfollow thing, especially in today's language, I find fascinating. You're so right. It's almost a disengagement, isn't it? I can formally be following you, but I've unfollowed already. The way I treat you, the way I engage you. I remember years ago being a young manager very quickly, and I know this assistant manager I had who thought he was more qualified and better than me, and maybe he was. In those days, you could smoke in the public area. So I'd come out of my office and go to his workstation, and he'd take his cigarette, put it to the other side of the table, and out of respect for the fact that I don't smoke. And a few months or years later, he wouldn't even take the cigarette away. He'd just keep it right there. And I could argue now, if I knew what I know now, that he unfollowed me. And there's quite a few behaviors I can see from him that he unfollowed me. And so, very quick tip: if what is your thought on when you discover someone has emotionally almost stopped following you and they've unfollowed you, but they still report to you? What do you do? What's the approach to that?
Well, I would say as a positional leader, the mistake you're going to make them is to try and bulldoze them into following you. In other words, leverage your hard power. But if you want proper results, what I have done in my case is to go inside myself to reflect on how have I been behaving with this person, which is similar to what you've just said you did. I reflect, and in fact, I do that with people, whether they're senior to me or junior to me or lateral relationships. When I feel that there's a strain in that relationship, I go inside and I go backwards to how we've interacted to try and find clues as to where we lost each other. Then I reset the relationship for myself and then go back to that person. There was an organization that I won't mention where at some stage we just really were cannibalizing on each other because we were, it was those transition stages and too much at stake, too much needed to be done on time. And we all stopped following each other. And I was lucky to meet a certain psychologist and who spoke about gratitude, to anchor your life in gratitude. Gratitude for the people who have been unkind to you and gratitude for people who have been kind to you, because they say it takes both the rain and the harshness of the sun to grow things. She said to me, instead of focusing on what was going wrong, I should look at the field of possibility. And later, I then attended a course on Stephen Covey's book,
Seven Habits.
The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Again, that message about focusing on the field of on your sphere of influence was hammered in. Seek first to understand before you can be understood. So I found that then once I do that, I reset the relationship and I engage with people differently, also to find out what's going on in their lives, because you often find that the way people behave has nothing to do with not wanting to comply with your instructions. It's often what's happening in their own internal world. And it helps when you reinforce then a culture of all of us building our internal world. And at Tuma, therefore, we encourage that people should build those 4 intelligences, what we call the easy intelligences. It's emotional intelligence, social intelligence, spiritual intelligence, and normal intelligence. And those bold leaders that we spoke about earlier, they tend to focus on social intelligence, which often becomes like being a sociopath, where you know how to manage people and how to direct them in a particular way. But at the end of the day, you're not really being authentic and you're not really prepared to be human with them.
Thank you so much. You talk about the leadership growth and development you're doing at Tuma Foundation, and I wanted you to tell us a little bit more about that, because we don't think there's anything more important we can do in our society than identifying current successful leaders and also growing those same leaders, but also others up and coming. How can we do anything more important than finding people? Because when you lead, you invariably bring the best self out, and leadership is that best part in all of us. If I'm exerting my worst part, I'm not leading, not really. When I bring out my best self, then I'm leading naturally, by example, by who I am, not what I say. So before we go to telling us a little bit more about how because we're gathering you do believe that multiplying more leaders and getting more leaders out there and bringing the leader out in people is a super important thing in our world, and that's why you have your foundation, among other things. Old man, any comment you want to make or question before we move on?
Yes, Thuli, you mentioned what I find is so beautiful. The point of emotional maturity is exactly at the point where one feels offended or unfollowed, as you two was discussing. And then you turn inside. Wow, that takes emotional maturity. What a privilege that is. And also that's where you start becoming free in the real sense of the word. And Thuli kind of represents that to us. Then the next step is to try to get to the inside, the authentic part of the other person. So therefore, the actual issue that caused the conflict is not really the point. And this is the beauty about that. If you're not confident in your own true self, then it's extremely difficult to really relate to the inner self of the other person as well. So Thuli has experienced a profound maturity experience to understand it takes real courage. Go inside first, because normally we react so quickly when we're offended in some way or other. Thanks for that, Thuli.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Louis. Firstly, you've hit the nail on its head around at the core of that internal growth being your own emotional maturity. And that without that emotional maturity, you can't become a confident leader. And Roosevelt Moskanta, who taught us for a year at Harvard in 2017, emphasizes the importance of confidence as a leader. And you can't lead with others if you're not confident, because your insecurities will cause you to be always wrapped around your own needs, your own concerns, and your own suspicions of others. And also, if you're not confident, if you're not mature, you can't share power. And what I discovered in leading is that power has to be shared not just in coalitions, but even when you have positional leadership with others. There are times when, as a positional leader, you've got to follow your PA because she has the best knowledge and skills on a PA issue, or we all have to follow the cleanup. So you have to keep dancing with change and resetting your relationships in such a way that sometimes you are following, sometimes you are leading, but ultimately taking responsibility and guardrailing the processes to make sure that things go according to plan. I do want to also say the epic leadership model is about cultivating leaders that are ethical, purpose-driven, impact-conscious, and committed to serve. But we've discovered to be able to do those things, those epic things, you need the 4 intelligences. You also need a growth mindset. You need to be a multiplier as a leader, the kind of person who breeds other leaders and who allows them to rise. And you need to have grit, because you're not always going to get it right. I mean, sometimes self-leadership fails not because we're narcissistic, but because we're too hard on ourselves. Again, that's something I personally discovered, Adrian, was that when I'm hard on myself, I tend to be harder on other people as well. And therefore, at the core of that leadership has to be self-compassion, which allows you to have empathy for the people that you are leading or leading with.
Yeah, it's just not possible on this journey of self-leadership, other leadership, organizational leadership, to do it perfectly. And hopefully we have leaders around us that can show compassion as we find ourselves, you know. And I guess if I can't have compassion on myself while I'm journeying, I'm not going to have it on others, maybe. I often find I'm harder on myself than on others. I'm actually softer on others than I am on myself. I am hard on myself, and that's good advice. You know, how exactly to be compassionate on yourself is probably different for every person. And but man, it's just such an amazing journey, isn't it? One of the reasons we're giving you this award is also for your commitment to mentoring and inspiring future successful leaders. So how important is this for you? I'm assuming, yeah, it's important for you, and I know it is, but tell us in your own words why it's important, and then maybe just filling the gaps. You've said quite a few things about what Tuma Foundation is doing in developing future leaders, but filling the gaps of what else you're doing, just very briefly. Yeah.
The cultivation of young leaders comes from an understanding that although people are born with certain traits of leadership, maybe genetically, but also from what they've learned in their families, their churches, and all of the socializing influences they've been exposed to, cultivating leadership deliberately does generate leaders. I am where I am because of the leadership programs at my church, the leadership programs I've gone through as a trade unionist when I worked at Wits and worked in government, and the leadership books I read, the videos I watch, your sessions that I watch, and many others. And at Tuma, we therefore believe that if this country has to be run functionally, if our democracy has to work and work for all, we need to cultivate leaders that are attuned to the ideals of our democracy, that will lead in a manner that is purposeful, which is in line with what are we trying to build together, in a manner that is impact conscious, so that it doesn't matter that you're aligned with your purpose, but be aware of unintended consequences. And those unintended consequences could be now, they could be on the environment, they could be on the future. They could be on our relationship with other countries as well. The third part is being committed to serve the final cause. So it's being ethical, purpose-driven, impact-conscious, and a commitment to serve. Just to say something on the last one, why we emphasize it, particularly to young people, is that people don't always say thank you for you doing the right thing. And if you are doing things for validation, then you're going to go off the hook or offline because you haven't received validation, and you'll be forever doing things that make you a person who has no consistency because you're looking for validation. And proper leadership means sometimes you have to stand alone and sometimes you have to stand with other people, but ultimately being driven by purpose.
Okay. So I mean, we just want your comment quickly before we look at broader issues towards the end of our conversation. We have now set a goal, a vision of finding and recognizing, like we are with you now, but you're the pinnacle of the recognition, finding and recognizing successful leaders out there. And we're aiming to find and mobilize on one platform 30,000 successful leaders.
Wow.
Now, there are more than 30,000. The trick is not just to find leaders at the very top, because then we send the message that only success is attached to top position. When we know the only reason you can give a CEO the recognition of successful leadership is because there are many other successful leaders in their organization. So we want to go find and recognize them and then mobilize them almost with a brief to say, please step it up a little bit in developing more leaders out there through your example, through however you can do it. Just your thoughts on, it'll be hashtag 30,000 successful leaders by 2030. And of course, there's a big plan in place. There's a platform. Everything is ready for the vision and the attaining of it. Just your thoughts on that.
I like that hashtag of 30,000 leaders by 2030. It also aligns very perfectly with the Sustainable Development Goals, where we are trying to make the whole world a better place by 2030, which includes issues of climate change, issues of social justice and equality, gender justice, etc. And for those goals to be achieved, we need leaders in all spaces and at all levels. And it can't just be leaders with positions. It should be people who just influence and inspire themselves and others to think in ways that are aligned with where we're going and act in ways that are aligned, and so that we can all achieve contributions to the world we want to be part of.
Thank you, Prof. You're right. I mean, I sometimes get it wrong, but the door of society swings on hinges of leadership, and we can just get that on all levels, better leadership then. And the truth is, there's many more good leaders in our society, successful leaders, than we realize. Just like there are many more good people than bad people in our country. So why is the country doing so badly in many ways? Maybe it's not doing as badly as we think, just as we may discover that there are many more successful leaders than we realize. So we want to start with that positive premise. Of course, in the process, you'll find a lot of these leaders, need to grow still and whatever it may be. But if we can just move on from there for a moment, and old man, jump in anytime you want to, but I want to know from you quickly, what are the broader issues we're going to grapple with as societal, business, political, social leaders in the next 5 to 10 years? In fact, the next year, if I look at South Africa elections in April, who knows what's going to happen before and after, during. America's got their elections coming end of next year, and gosh, I don't know how America can't come up with better leaders. So we've got lots of issues just in the next year, but in the next 5 years, what are the truly big issues that all leaders in business and society and politics should be aware of and that we should be grappling with? Just some comments on the broader macro leadership landscape, perhaps, Prof.
I think at a global level, I would say peace is going to be something that we really need to step up on. And there is a saying that a stitch in time saves 9. Already one of the books I have is by Leonard Mark that talks about ours being a world of unpeace. We know that war, we know that peace. So what are some of the reasons that have created a fractured world? Corruption is one of the reasons we've become fractured.
Let me just find who, I don't know. Please mute yourselves, folks, if you don't mind. If you're not muted, then I don't have to look for you. Thank you so much. Sorry, Prof, go on.
Yes, corruption is one of those things that divide us within countries, within organizations, and at a global level, including at the level of global governance. And I've already mentioned social justice. The UN system is built on understanding that the First and Second World Wars happened primarily because of injustice and the resentment that comes from injustice, and therefore a more just world, a more fair world where the playing field is level is more likely to have less fracture. Climate change is something that leaders need to think about. Again, that whole notion of a stitch in time. We don't have to wait until our part of the world is crumbling, because people often say, oh, Africa has not contributed immensely to the carbon footprint. The tons and tons of footprints, carbon footprints come from the richest in the world, and they're not here. That's not going to help us because clouds do not have borders. Clouds do not have borders, and wherever we are, we need to be concerned about climate change. But also climate change is one of the drivers of unplanned migration. I think also we need to grapple with technology. I think artificial intelligence and all kinds of breakthrough technologies are marvelous. However, without proper controls, they can exacerbate inequalities, but they can also exacerbate fracture, because AI is often used to manufacture lies. I don't know if you saw recently, just today, that the former Prime Minister of Pakistan was able to give a total speech using AI. Being not there, but reproducing his image, reproducing his voice, and people could not say that this is not Imran Khan.
Sure.
And that's good in this case because he's in prison and he wants to participate in the elections, the campaign for elections. But the same thing can be used to frame people. The same thing can be used to undermine democracy, which takes me to democracy backsliding. Why Tuma was created was to push back against democracy backsliding. And a lot of that democracy backsliding was from among young people who feel democracy does not work for them, that they're still in a state of unfreedom regardless of democracy. But my two young children, Buso Bantu and Wenzile, were the ones who came up with the idea that, no, but people just don't know what is democracy. Democracy is a concept with a lot of plasticity. Democracy as we know it today is not as it was in 5th century Athens. And therefore, there's a lot of room for molding democracy to meet the dictates of our time and ensure that it works for all, and it's a vehicle for managing our social cohesion.
Yeah, Prof, I mean, as we get to the end, and at the end, I'll ask you to give a message to leaders, and Old Man can give his final thoughts. The word trust comes into my mind. And, you know, if we believe technology is so all-powerful through artificial intelligence, which, as you say, can be such a good thing, and you can frame anyone, you can do so much damage and hurt through technology, the hacking process, election systems, election rigging. Ultimately, at the bottom of all of this is young people don't trust the system, maybe don't trust the leaders. Don't, where does trust come into this, stopping democracy from backsliding? How do we bring the two together? How do we improve trust? There's a trust deficit hugely between leaders and followers, or between human beings in general.
There certainly is a trust deficit, particularly when it comes to politics. People are no longer convinced that institutions of governance are there to protect them and to do the right thing. Fortunately, the courts are still relatively trusted, but this democracy backsliding can get worse. So what do we do? Number one, it's really democracy education or democracy literacy, which is what the Tuma Foundation does. Is often people just don't trust things because they don't know how things work. When a whole lot of people think I was in parliament, I meet them, they like me, but they think I was in parliament when we talk, which means that people are being governed by a system they don't understand. How do you hold people accountable in a system that you don't understand? So democracy education and constitutional literacy combined with basic legal literacy, people to understand. Because what we then get is young people becoming part of a social accountability cohort. Because at the moment we rely on courts, institutions such as the public protector, the media, etc., to hold business, government, and big civil society accountable. But people need to be part of that holding others accountable, and that will improve trust. So again, empowering people by creating inroads for them to come in. I like the electoral changes that have happened in our country, in that we're going to have more pathways for people getting involved in politics, in national politics. At the moment, a whole lot of young people have gone into local government. Now they can go into provincial and national government. That will also improve trust, because people will know somebody who's part of the system and understand the system. But ultimately, there are two keys to building trust in all institutions: transparency and participation.
Nicely said. I mean, just step by step, isn't it? I mean, it's so easy to feel demoralized, demotivated when you look at all the things that are going wrong, and there's so much going wrong, and we can just go one step at a time. I think, who was it? I don't know if it was. Anyway, when you climb, I read a talk the other day about a couple who climbed the highest mountain in, is it Japan? And how difficult it was to summit, but they learned there one step at a time. I'm sure you also experienced it as you climbed Kilimanjaro. Just go one step at a time, and then eventually you get there. So we can all just go one step at a time, and hopefully we push back against all the decay and the immorality and the weak leadership. Let's just keep chipping away. Old man, just your final comments, and then Prof, I'll go to you last to give a message to leaders in general that we can also cut out for sharing afterwards. Just any message you want to give leaders about exceptional leadership as someone that we think demonstrated it in a last decade or couple. Old man?
Audrey, I think the more we try and do what we're doing, the more we're reflecting the spirit and tone of what Thuli represents. Thuli, I trust that you will not let go of who you are, in spite of all the incredible agenda you have to participate, as you say, transparency, but with participation. But thank you, Thuli. You've just represented the spirit of this country, which is so beautiful in its own right. And we hope we can magnify that with other leaders of your caliber. Thank you.
Go ahead, Prof, your final message.
Thank you so much. that's really encouraging to all leaders, whether positional or voluntary. The world we want to live in lies in our collective hands, as Nelson Mandela once said. We all have the capacity to rise through lifting others, as Charlotte Maxeke once said. But as you've just said, Adrian, we can change the situation one step at a time. Pole pole, we say when climbing mountains. And Nelson Mandela put it in that way. When you summit one hill, you discover that there are many more hills to climb. But let us not be the ones who create hills, though, that our people have to climb. When we did the trek for Mandela climbing, we said we climb these mountains, we summit Kilimanjaro so that young people may not be forced to climb mountains. They may choose what mountains they want to climb, so that the next generation does better than us. We stand on shoulders of giants. The freedoms we enjoy today globally are because others before us stepped up, leveled up, and made a difference. From the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 75 years ago, where women, at a time where women were not regarded as leaders, stepped up and drove that process and came with a document that up to date influences laws, policies, and thought processes. So never think you're too small to make a difference as a leader and as a human being. And in this continent, as part of Ubuntu, we say, if you think it's too small to make a difference, you've never been in a room with a single mosquito.
Thank you so much, Professor Thuli Madonsela, giving her today the Exceptional Leadership Award for consistently leading self and people successfully, leading as public protector of South Africa in her past, showing how exceptional leadership can ignite hope for a brighter future, and continuing her journey of building a better and happier society together with, of course, exceptional influence on the mentoring and inspiring of future successful leaders. From Me Vision Academy, thank you so much. It's been an honor and a privilege, and also having everyone with us today. We really appreciate all of you joining us, and that's Me Vision Academy, giving the recognition of exceptional leadership to Professor Thuli Madonsela. We appreciate your time and look forward to sharing it. All the best. Bye-bye.